Stephen K. Peeples here, talking with Chuck Granata and Martin Melucci about the Frank Sinatra A Voice on Air collection of radio performances from back in the day. And one of the things that has always surprised me about Sinatra and his singing and his voice was that he smoked cigarettes through his entire career. And part of the classic setup when he's in the studio is a pack of smokes, some Jack Daniels, and this is the way he rolls.
I really should clarify. I really don't think he was drinking in the studio.
Yeah, I've never really seen any,
even from listening to some unedited session material and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't think Frank really drank in the studio very much. Certainly afterwards. Whereas Billie Holiday, especially towards the end, was famous. I mean, there were musicians that said that she literally came in with fifths of gin, and they had to send people out to get more booze for her during the sessions. But Frank did smoke. As deleterious as it was to his overall health and certainly to his voice, he did smoke. Yeah.
Well, who knew? I mean, back in that period, it was just part of the culture. Everybody did it. Right. Nobody knew that the effects were basically fatal. Right. So and he did you pointed out he did commercials, and a lot of his shows were sponsored by cigarettes, cigarette manufacturers.
Right. And they're really trying to promote almost not healthful, but almost healthful. They are.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, there are commercials.
Doctors that said it was good to smoke and so on.
But
there are commercials in which they talk about how certain brands are better for the voice. I mean, it's really kind of preposterous given what we know today.
Look, everything in moderation, and it affected people differently. And you get a guy like Nat King Cole who was amazing, and he liked the way, and to a degree, I hate to say it, he was actually kind of right, but it killed him with the way the smoke was affecting his voice. But he just had too much of it too soon.
Crazy.
Where he wanted that smoky quality a little too fast, sadly.
I was never a smoker, never smoked, so I don't understand the attraction or the,
Well, I'm an ex-smoker, so I kind of understand both sides of the.
Yeah.
But that's
likely, and it's not going to kill them most likely.
But in the 1940s, it was ubiquitous, and a lot of the sponsors of these radio programs, and then television to follow, were tobacco companies.
Oh yeah, and they
right in your hand.
Well, I think it was actually. It's funny because when Lucille Ball and Des Yarnez did "I Love Lucy," and their show was sponsored by Philip Morris, it was in their contract that they had to smoke a certain number of cigarettes in scenes in each episode.
Right.
So, that's how important and critical the sponsor was, and the sponsor, felt their product placement had to be even that early.
Product placement was always there.
It was. Well, you can hear it on this box set, beginning in 1940 with the Nature's Remedy
I was thinking of that.
Laxative commercial that we hear.
Right.
The Vim's Vitamin commercial. I tried to include a commercial from each of the shows that Frank did, the major shows. So, this box set includes a Nature's Remedy commercial, a Vim's Vitamin commercial.
And a picture of the Nature's Remedy ad, one of the ads.
Yes,
and our picture in there.
In the book.
In the book.
We included an Old Gold commercial, a Max Factor commercial, a Bobby Home Permanent commercial.
You need confidence for conquest.
Yes. That's it's just a great snapshot of advertising in the 40s and 50s as well, because, that was a big part of culture then.
But getting back to smoking and Sinatra, I always wondered what his voice would have sounded like if he had not smoked. And he still had that amazing sense of phrasing and timing and so forth.
It would have stayed sweeter a little bit longer, I'd imagine.
It's a very...
I don't know if it would be better, it would just probably be different.
It's an interesting question. I think it would have retained more of the purity and tenderness of those earlier years.
Yeah.
We know that cigarette smoke definitely damages the vocal cords. It affects them. So, the fact that he didn't get throat cancer or lung cancer the way Nat King Cole did is kind of like a miracle. At the same time, you can hear how his voice changes and deepens, and I wonder if some of that was due to the damaging effects.
He always found ways to use it to his advantage.
If there is an advantage, I'm
no,
not
I mean
sure.
As far as his voice changing, and his voice started to get a little bit more scratchy or hoarse, he used the age in his voice to his advantage.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true. For sure.
Well, there were some times, it's kind of pretty well known, there were sometimes he'd walk into the studio and he'd start to sing and it just wasn't happening. Right. And he'd just say, not tonight, guys. And
absolutely,
he'd take off. He kind of knew when his voice was recording ready.
Right.
And it wasn't always there. So I think that was partially the effect. He couldn't just dial it in on cue, at any time. It had to be
absolutely not. You can hear, one of the things that was surprising to me is I really started to focus on the performances from that early period, is how fragile his voice was. And there are points where you can hear him sing a phrase and it cracks a little bit. You hear it almost starting to crack. And so he had a strong voice in one sense, but in another sense, it was extraordinarily fragile.